The signal arrived like a whisper in a storm. It was weak, broken, and full of static. It bounced off dead satellites and old ice rocks before it finally reached the listening post on the edge of the dark cloud. Commander Vance sat in his chair and listened to the repeating message. The voice was tired. It was Zalari. They spoke of burning cities, of falling shields, of an enemy that showed no mercy. The name of the enemy was not clear in the static, but the fear was easy to hear. Vance did not move for a long time. His hands rested on the cold metal desk. He looked at the old stone tablet on the wall. It was cracked and worn, but the words on it were still clear. It was a promise. 300 years ago, the sky had fallen on the last human colony. Fire rained down. Ships broke apart. The great powers of the galaxy had turned away, but one species had come. The Zalari had opened their doors. They had taken in the broken survivors. They had shared food, shelter, and hope. When the humans asked how they could ever repay such a debt, the Zalari leader had only smiled and said, "Just remember us when you are strong." Humanity had remembered. They had gone quiet. They had hidden in the deep dark, far from the bright trade routes and busy stars. They built new ships in hollow asteroids. They trained new soldiers in silent caves. They waited. They grew strong in the shadows while the galaxy forgot their name. The history books called them extinct. The enemy thought they were gone, but the ledger was never closed. A favor is not a gift. It is a debt, and humans never forget a debt. Vance stood up. He picked up his heavy coat and walked out of the listening room. The cold air of the station bit at his face. He walked down the long metal hall. The lights were dim. The floor hummed with quiet power. He reached the command center. It was a large room with a round table and a glass ceiling that showed the empty dark. Around the table sat the elders of the hidden fleet. They were old men and women with tired eyes and steady hands. They had spent their whole lives keeping the secret. They had watched generations grow up without ever seeing a real sun. "You heard it," said an old woman named Commander Hale. Her voice was flat. "The Zalari are falling." Vance nodded. "They are burning. The signal is weak, but it is real." "If we answer," said a man with a scar across his cheek, "we show them where we are. We break 3 centuries of silence. Every pirate, every empire, every hungry warlord will know we are still here. They will come for us." "We are not ready for open war," another elder said. "Our ships are hidden. Our factories are quiet. If we move, we risk everything we have built." The room fell silent. The hum of the station felt louder. Vance looked at each face. He saw fear. He saw caution. He also saw duty. They all knew the truth. The Zalari had saved them. Without that help, there would be no hidden fleet. There would be no Vance. There would be no one left to argue. Vance walked to the center of the table. He placed his hands on the cold surface. "We did not hide to save ourselves forever," he said. His voice was calm but firm. "We hid to grow. We hid to prepare. They gave us time. They gave us life. Now they are asking for help. If we stay quiet, we are not survivors. We are cowards." "It is a heavy price," Hale said softly. "Yes," Vance agreed, "but it is ours to pay. We do not argue over debts. We settle them." He looked around the table. No one spoke. The weight of the choice hung in the air. Then, slowly, Hale nodded. The man with the scar closed his eyes and nodded. One by one, the others followed. The vote was clear. The long quiet was over. Vance turned to the main screen. He pressed a button. A soft light spread across the room. He opened the fleet channel. His voice traveled through miles of rock and ice, down into the deep dry docks, into the training yards, into the sleeping quarters of thousands of soldiers, pilots, and engineers. "This is Commander Vance," he said. "The Zalari are in danger. 300 years ago they gave us a future. Today we give them ours. Prepare the ships. Load the weapons. Wake the crews. We move in 6 hours. This is not a request. This is a promise." The station came alive. Alarms did not sound. There was no panic. There was only the steady, practiced rhythm of people who had waited for this moment their whole lives. Boots hit the floor. Doors slid open. Lights turned on. In the deep caves, giant engines began to warm up. The sound was low at first, like a sleeping giant taking a breath. Then it grew louder. It shook the dust from the walls. It shook the ice from the rocks. Vance walked to the observation window. He watched as the first hangar doors began to open. Outside, the stars were hidden by thick dust and gas, but soon the ships would fly out. They would leave the dark. They would jump into the light. He thought about the old stone tablet. He thought about the Zalari leader's smile. He thought about all the children who had grown up in the shadows, learning how to fight, how to build, how to wait. They were not waiting anymore. A young officer walked up to him. She held a data pad. Fleet status is green, Commander. All ships report ready. Navigation is locked. Weapons are online. Vance looked at her. Her face was pale, but her eyes were bright. Good, he said. Tell the captains to keep formation. We do not announce ourselves. We do not ask for permission. We just go. Yes, sir, she said. She turned and walked away. Vance stayed by the window. He watched the dust swirl in the opening doors. He felt the floor vibrate under his boots. He knew what was coming. The galaxy would be shocked. The enemy would be confused. The Zalari would not believe their eyes at first, but none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was the vow. It had been carved in stone. It had been kept in silence. Now it was time to speak. The first ship moved forward. It was a dark gray warship shaped like a blade. It had no markings. It carried no flags. It only carried people who remembered. Vance closed his eyes for a second. He felt the weight of 300 years on his shoulders. He did not feel tired. He felt ready. Engage the drives, he said to the room. The command echoed through the fleet. Engines flared. Blue light cut through the dark. The ship slipped out of the ice clouds and into open space. They moved in perfect silence. They aligned in the void. The navigation computer calculated the jump. Space began to bend. Stars stretched into thin lines of light. Vance stood straight. He watched the countdown on the screen. 3, 2, 1. The fleet jumped. The dark was left behind. Ahead, the signal grew stronger. Ahead, a war waited. Ahead, a promise would be kept. The galaxy thought humanity was gone. They thought time had erased them. They were wrong. Humans do not forget. They carve their promises into stone and they wait for the right moment to stand up. The moment had come. The ledger was open, and they were coming to balance it. Vance walked through the long metal corridors of the hidden shipyard. The walls were thick and cold. They were built from crushed asteroids and the salvaged hulls of old colony ships. The air smelled of hot oil, burnt wire, and clean ozone. Above him, heavy cranes moved in slow, careful circles. They carried thick plates of armor and bundles of reinforced cable. This place had no name. It had no lights that showed on any trade map. It was a secret kept for 300 years, buried deep inside a dead star system. He stopped at a wide glass window that looked down into the main dock. Below him, a warship floated in the dark. It was not like the smooth, polished ships shown in old history files. It was rough. It was patched. Every part of it had been built by human hands. They had taken broken engines from forgotten mining outposts. They had melted down old tunnel drills to make heavy railgun barrels. They had grown computer minds from simple organic chips that learned and adapted to damage. Nothing was pretty, everything worked. The humans had not asked the galaxy for help. They had learned to build in the dark. They had turned scrap into swords. A young mechanic named Jace walked up to Vance. His hands were black with grease. His uniform had tears at the elbows and fresh stitching on the shoulders. He held a data pad with steady fingers. "Captain," he said, "the drive core on Ship 4 is stable. We ran the stress tests 3 times. It will hold under jump pressure." Vance looked at him. "You have been awake for 2 days." "Sleep comes later," Jace said. "The drive is ready. That is what matters." Vance nodded. He had seen this look on many faces. It was the look of people who had never seen a bright, unfiltered sun. It was the look of people who had only known the cold rock and the quiet hum of backup generators. Yet their eyes were clear. They did not complain. They did not ask why they had to leave the safety of the caves. They just worked. They knew their duty. They had been born in the dark so the fleet could fly. A soft red light blinked on the wall panel. A low chime echoed in the hall. Vance stepped into the small comms room next door. The main screen showed a wide map of the outer systems. Red dots marked enemy positions. Blue dots marked the Xylari defense lines. The blue dots were fading fast. A junior analyst stood by the console. Her face was pale, but her posture was straight. "Report," Vance said. "The Krell ascendancy has broken the outer ring," she said. Her voice was steady but tight. "They are using heavy plasma burners on the Xylari cities. The atmosphere is catching fire. 3 core worlds are down to 20% shield strength. The Xylari command is broadcasting a final retreat order. If the shields fail, the glassing will be complete in less than 4 hours." Vance stared at the map. 4 hours. The distance was great. The jump would take time, but the math was simple. They had to move now or there would be nothing left to save. He thought of the old promise. He thought of the Xylari transport ships that had once carried human children through burning space. He would not let their worlds turn to ash. "Open the fleet channel," he said. The analyst pressed a button. A green light lit up on the main board. Every captain in the hidden fleet could hear him now. Vance leaned into the microphone. His voice was calm. It carried across the empty halls and deep into the engine rooms. "This is Vance. Intel confirms the Krell attack. The Xylari are falling. We are jumping to the battle zone. Activate Black Ledger protocol." The words hung in the air. Black Ledger meant total commitment. No radio chatter, no demands, no warning shots. The fleet would arrive in silence. They would strike fast. They would not stop until the job was done. It was the final stage of their training. It was the plan they had practiced in secret for decades. "Engines spool up to maximum," Vance continued. "Lock navigation to the target coordinates. All weapons hot. We do not ask for permission to enter the fight. We are already there in spirit. Now we bring our ships. Move with purpose. Move as one. Out." The channel clicked shut. Through the thick glass, Vance watched the shipyards change. The slow cranes stopped. The heavy plates were locked into place. Maintenance crews stepped back and gave sharp hand signals. The warships began to glow. Blue lines of light traced along their hulls. They looked like sleeping creatures waking up. Vance walked back to the command deck. The floor vibrated under his boots. It was a deep, steady thrum. The drive cores were waking up. Technicians ran along the metal catwalks, checking seals, watching gauges, wiping sweat from their foreheads. There was no shouting. There was only the sound of heavy boots, the click of switches, and the low growl of power building in the belly of each ship. A senior pilot named Rael approached him. She wore a simple gray flight suit. A small patch on her shoulder showed a broken chain. That was the symbol of their people. "Free, but responsible. Captain," she said. "The jump window is open. The dark space between here and the Xylari front is clear of debris. We can make the drop in 90 minutes. "Good," Vance said. "Keep the formation tight. We arrive as a single fist, not scattered fingers." Rael smiled. It was a small thing, but it carried weight. "We are ready." Vance watched her walk away. He turned back to the main screen. The red dots on the map were spreading. The blue dots were almost gone. He knew what would happen when they arrived. The Krell would be surprised. They had grown used to easy victories. They had grown lazy. They thought the galaxy belonged only to the loud and the strong. They had forgotten that strength could hide. Strength could wait. Strength could remember. He placed his hand on the cold console. He felt the pulse of the ship. It matched the beat of his own heart. He thought of the thousands of people behind him. Mechanics, pilots, gunners, medics, cooks, engineers. All of them had lived in the quiet. All of them had trained for this one moment in dark simulation rooms. They were not heroes in their own minds. They were just people keeping a promise. The drive whine grew louder. The lights on the deck shifted from white to a sharp blue. The navigation computer counted down on the screen. The numbers fell in steady steps. The ship shuddered as the gravity field aligned. Space outside the window began to bend. The stars stretched into thin, bright lines. Vance stood straight. He did not hold on to anything. He knew the feeling of the jump. It was like falling forward into a deep, cold river. Then came the push. Then came the destination. Final check, the analyst called out. All ships report green. Drives at 98%. Formation locked, awaiting command. Vance took a slow breath. He looked at the face of every officer on the deck. They were watching him. They were waiting. He gave a single nod. "Execute the jump," he said. The ship lurched. The world outside the window twisted and broke. The dark caves, the quiet shipyards, the 300 years of hiding all vanished in a flash of blue light. The fleet tore through the fabric of space. They left the safety of the shadows behind. They flew straight toward the fire, toward the enemy, toward the people who had once saved them. The silence of the hidden years was over. The engines roared, the weapons were loaded. The humans were coming back, and they would not be ignored. The galaxy would soon learn what happens when a quiet debt finally comes due. The forge in the dark had done its work. Now it was time to strike. The ledger would be balanced, one shot at a time. The jump ended with a heavy shudder. Space snapped back into its normal shape. The dark blue tunnel of the jump drive vanished. Outside the main viewports, real stars appeared. But they were not alone. The sky was filled with fire. The Krell fleet hung in space like a swarm of angry insects. Their ships were long, sharp, and covered in glowing red vents. They were pouring heavy plasma fire into the Zalari defense line. Green Zalari shields flickered and failed. Broken hulls and frozen debris floated in slow, silent circles. The battle was already half lost. Vance stood on the command deck. His hands rested on the cold metal rail. He did not shout. He did not panic. He watched the tactical screen with calm eyes. The Krell had not noticed them yet. The human fleet had dropped out of the jump exactly where they planned. They were behind the enemy supply lines. They were behind the fuel depots. They were behind the command relay ships. They were ghosts in the enemy blind spot. "Hold position," Vance said. His voice was low and steady. "Let them commit." The bridge crew worked in quiet focus. Officers tapped screens. Pilots checked weapon locks. Gunners ran final diagnostics. No one spoke unless it was necessary. They had trained for this exact moment. They knew the drill. The human ships ran on minimal power. Their hulls absorbed heat and light. To the Krell sensors, they were just floating rocks, just empty space dust. On the screen, the Krell command ship moved forward. It was a massive dreadnought, thick with armor and heavy turrets. It fired a wide beam of white energy. The beam hit a Zalari cruiser. The green shield shattered into bright fragments. The Zalari ship broke apart in a silent flash of orange fire. Vance closed his eyes for a second. He felt the weight of the loss, but he did not look away. He opened his eyes. "Now," he said. The order traveled through the fleet. In one smooth motion, the human ships powered up. Engines flared blue. Railguns charged. Missile bays opened. Drone launchers cycled. The silence broke. But it did not break with noise. It broke with precision. The first wave struck the Krell relay stations. Heavy kinetic slugs fired from the human ships. They moved faster than sound. They tore through Krell communication arrays like thin paper. The relays exploded in clouds of metal and frozen gas. Without the relays, the Krell fleet lost contact with each other. Their tight formation broke. Ships drifted out of line. They stopped firing in sync. The second wave hit the fuel depots. Smart missiles dove into the large storage tanks. The tanks ruptured. Fire spread through the empty space in strange, slow patterns. Krell supply ships tried to run. Human interceptors cut them off. They fired short, controlled bursts. The supply ships lost power. They spun away, useless and dark. The third wave targeted the command dreadnoughts. Drone swarms launched from the human hulls. Thousands of small, fast machines flew into the Krell defense grid. They moved like a school of fish. They dodged turret fire. They stuck to the enemy hulls. They planted shaped charges. The charges blew. Armor plates fell away. Internal systems failed. Lights went out on the Krell ships. Vance watched it all on the main screen. The Krell were strong, they had heavy armor, they had big guns, but they were slow. They expected a straight fight. They expected an enemy to line up and trade shots in a neat row. Humans did not fight like that. Humans fought like water. They found the cracks. They flowed around the strong points. They hit the weak spots until the whole structure collapsed. Enemy command is scrambling, the tactical officer said. They are trying to reform their line, but their relays are gone. They cannot coordinate their fire. Good, Vance said. Keep pressure on the center. Do not let them recover. On the other side of the battlefield, the Zalari survivors watched in shock. Their shields had been failing. Their ships were running out of power. They had accepted death. Then the Krell ships behind them started exploding. Supply lines vanished. Command relays went dark. The pressure on their front line dropped. Zalari admirals stared at their sensors. They saw new ships appear on the edge of the battle. They were dark. They were fast. They had no flags, no known markings. A Zalari admiral opened a wide channel. Her voice was tired but sharp. Unidentified vessels. State your origin. Identify your command structure. This is a restricted war zone. Vance pressed a button on his console. He opened a tight beam channel. It went only to the Zalari command. It was secure. It was clear. He did not use a code. He did not use a voice mask. He used his own voice. "This is Captain Elias Vance of the Terran Remnant Fleet," he said. "We are not here to take territory. We are not here to ask for alliance. 300 years ago, your people pulled our ancestors from the fire. You kept our children breathing when the sky fell. You asked for nothing in return. We are here to return the favor." Silence filled the Zalari channel. Then a soft sound, a breath, a whisper. "Humans," the admiral said, "you survived." "We waited," Vance replied. "Now we fight. Align your remaining ships to Grid 7. We will cover your flank. Do not waste your ammunition. Let us handle the heavy targets." The Zalari admiral did not argue. She gave the order. Green Zalari ships shifted position. They moved into the gaps the humans had opened. They reloaded their weapons. They found new strength. For the first time in months, they were not just surviving. They were holding the line. Vance turned back to the battle. The Krell were finally reacting. Their remaining dreadnoughts turned toward the human fleet. Heavy turrets swiveled. Plasma cannons charged. They fired. Bright beams of energy cut through the dark. Human ships moved. They did not stand still. They rolled. They dipped. They used floating debris as cover. Their point defense guns fired in steady streams. They knocked incoming missiles out of the sky. They took minor hits. Armor scorched. Shields flickered, but no ship broke. The crews stayed calm. They adjusted. They adapted. They kept firing. "Captain, enemy fleet is attempting a counterattack," the tactical officer said. "They are pushing forward with their reserves." "Let them," Vance said. "They are overextended. Their command structure is broken. Their supply is gone. They are fighting on instinct. Instinct is not enough." He tapped a command into the console. "Deploy the electronic warfare suite. Jam their targeting sensors. Feed false data into their navigation computers." The order went out. Human ships emitted a wave of silent signals. The signals washed over the Krell fleet. Krell targeting screens filled with static. Their navigation computers showed ghost ships. Their gunners aimed at empty space. Their ships fired at shadows. The Krell formation turned into chaos. Ships collided. Friendly fire lit up the dark. The heavy dreadnoughts drifted without direction. Vance watched the screen. The tide had turned. It was not a miracle, it was preparation. It was discipline, it was memory. The humans had spent 300 years studying every kind of war. They had learned from old battles. They had built tools for every situation. They had waited for the right moment. Now the moment was here. The Zalari ships pushed forward. They fired at the confused Krell vessels. Human railguns provided covering fire. Drone swarms harried the enemy flanks. The Krell line cracked. Then it broke. Then it scattered. Ships turned and ran. Some powered down. Some surrendered. The sky cleared of enemy fire. Vance exhaled slowly. He felt the tension leave his shoulders, but he did not celebrate. The battle was won, but the war was not over, he knew that. He looked at the tactical map. The Zalari core worlds were safe, for now. The Krell would regroup. They would send more ships. They would be angry. They would want revenge. He turned to his crew. "Well done," he said. "Reload weapons. Repair damage. Check for casualties. We stay in formation. We keep our eyes open." The bridge responded with quiet nods and steady hands. No one cheered. No one shouted. They just went back to work. That was the human way. They did not fight for glory. They fought for a promise. And the promise was only half kept. Outside the viewport, the Zalari fleet drifted closer. Their green hulls were scarred. Their lights were dim, but they were alive. A single Zalari cruiser moved alongside Vance's ship. Its captain opened a channel. "Captain Vance, you have saved our worlds. We owe you a debt we cannot measure." Vance looked at the screen. He saw the faces of the Zalari crew. They looked tired. They looked grateful. They looked human in the way that mattered. They understood what it meant to survive. "Keep your people safe," Vance said. "That is enough for now. We will hold the line. You will rebuild. And when the Krell return, we will be here." The channel closed. Vance turned back to the main window. The stars were still burning. The debris was still floating, but the fire was gone. The silence had returned. But this time it was not the silence of hiding. It was the silence of standing guard. Humanity had been seen, and they did not flinch. They would not run. The ledger was open, and they would stay until it was closed. The calm did not last. The Krell were not a species that ran from a fight. They adapted. Within hours of their first retreat, they changed their tactics. They stopped sending small ships. They stopped relying on broken supply lines. Instead, they brought forward their heaviest weapon. It was called a gravity shear device. It did not shoot fire, it bent space itself. When it fired, the air around human ships twisted and tore. Armor cracked like thin glass. Ships folded in on themselves. Metal groaned. People screamed over broken comms. The human line buckled. 3 escort vessels were lost in a single minute. They vanished into a sudden crush of dark gravity. Vance stood on the command deck. The deck was shaking. Alarms wailed in sharp, repeating tones. Red lights painted the walls. Sparks fell from a damaged ceiling panel. He watched the tactical screen with a hard face. The Krell Prime Nexus had arrived. It was a mobile fortress, larger than any ship Vance had ever seen. It sat in the center of the enemy formation, protected by layers of heavy shields and fast drone escorts. From its core, the gravity shear beams pulsed out. They cut through human formations like a blade through cloth. "Losses are mounting," the tactical officer said. Her voice was tight. "We cannot hold this position. Their shields are too thick. Our railguns bounce off." Vance knew she was right. They had won the first fight with surprise and speed. Now the Krell knew what they were fighting. They had brought a hammer. The humans needed to break the hammer. He looked at the screen. The Nexus was the heart of the attack. If it fell, the gravity weapons would stop. If it stayed, the human fleet would be crushed. "We do not hold," Vance said. "We strike. Prepare the anvil array." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. The anvil array was an experimental weapon. It had never been tested in real combat. It used phase cannons to rewrite local spacetime. It was unstable. It was dangerous. It could tear their own ships apart if it misfired, but it was their only chance. "Sir," the chief engineer said over the comm, "the array is not stable. Power draw will spike. If the targeting is off by even 1 degree, the feedback will destroy us." "I know," Vance said. "Run the calibration. Divert all non-essential power. We are not firing from a distance. We are going inside." He turned to the weapons officer. "Prep boarding shuttles. I need a strike team. Engineers and Marines, fast gear, cutting tools, breaching charges. We are taking the Nexus by hand." "You are leading it?" the tactical officer asked. "Yes," Vance said. "I will not ask my people to do what I will not do. Tell the fleet to draw their fire. Keep them busy. We slip through the gap." The bridge moved fast. Orders were given. Ships changed course. They fired flares, drones, and false signals. They made the human fleet look larger. They pulled Krell turrets away from the center. In the chaos, 3 dark boarding shuttles detached from Vance's ship. They flew low and fast. They used the debris field for cover. They slipped past the outer drone screen. Vance sat in the lead shuttle. He checked his gear. Heavy armor, magnetic boots, a compact rail pistol, a data spike for the core terminal. Beside him sat 6 others. They were not career soldiers. 2 were engine mechanics. 1 was a welder. 2 were medics who also knew how to cut through bulkheads. They looked at Vance with quiet eyes. They were scared, but they were ready. "We hit hard," Vance said. "We do not stop. We go straight down. Cut through anything that blocks us. Clear the path, plant the charges, reach the core." The shuttle shook. They passed through a cloud of frozen gas. Alarms blared as Krell point defense fire swept past. Metal pinged against the hull. The pilot fought the controls. Then a heavy thud. They had docked. Magnetic clamps locked onto the Nexus hull. "Move," Vance said. The hatch blew open. Vacuum hissed. They stepped into a dark metal corridor. Red emergency lights flashed. The air was cold and thick. Heavy boots rang on the floor. Krell guards appeared at the far end. They were tall, armored in black plates, carrying plasma rifles. They fired. Bright bolts hit the walls. Vance raised his pistol. He fired short bursts. The Krell armor sparked. They fell. The humans pushed forward. They did not hesitate. They moved like a single unit. 1 man dropped a smoke canister. Another laid down, covering fire. A mechanic used a cutting torch to slice through a sealed door. Sparks flew. Metal glowed orange. The door fell inward. They pushed deeper. The Nexus shuddered around them. Outside, the human fleet was taking heavy fire. Ships were burning, but they held the line. They bought time. A heavy blast hit the corridor behind them. 2 soldiers went down. A medic ran to them. She pressed a hand to a broken chest plate. She looked up at Vance. Her eyes were wet. She gave a small nod. "Go, I will hold them." Vance swallowed the lump in his throat. He did not look back. He could not. He pressed forward. The corridor narrowed. The walls grew hot. The hum of the gravity shear core vibrated in his teeth. They reached a wide chamber. In the center stood a massive machine. Cables thick as tree trunks fed into a glowing blue sphere. This was the heart, the control hub. Krell engineers scrambled to activate emergency locks. Vance fired. He dropped 2. The rest ran. He walked to the main console. His hands moved fast. He pulled the data spike from his belt. He jammed it into the port. The screen lit up with alien symbols. He did not need to read them. He knew where the overload command was. "Plant the charges," he ordered, "on the main supports, on the power conduits, everything that holds this room together." The team moved. They set the explosives with quick, practiced hands. The welder checked the seals. The mechanic ran the detonator line. Vance stood by the sphere. He felt the heat on his face. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small metal tag. It belonged to a pilot who had died in the first jump. It was scratched and worn. Vance placed it on the console. A promise kept. A debt paid. "Charges set," the welder called out. "We need to move. The feedback will kill anyone in this room." "Go," Vance said. "I have to lock the sequence manually. The remote signal will not penetrate the core shielding." "Captain," the mechanic started. "Go," Vance repeated. "That is an order. Run." They looked at him. They saw the set of his jaw. They saw the metal tag on the console. They turned and ran. Heavy boots echoed down the hall. The hatch sealed behind them. Vance stood alone. The blue sphere pulsed. The gravity hum grew louder. He typed the final command into the console. The anvil array locked on. Power surged. The ship shook violently. Lights blew out. Alarms screamed in a steady, deafening tone. The console sparked. Smoke filled the air. Vance held the activation key. His hand did not shake. He pressed it. A soundless wave hit him. It was not fire, it was pure force. It bent light, it cracked metal. The blue sphere turned white. The cables snapped. The supports groaned and buckled. The phase cannons fired inward, space inside the core fractured. The Nexus screamed as its own gravity turned against it. Walls split. Floors collapsed. The massive fortress began to tear itself apart from the inside. Vance fell backward. He hit the ground hard. Pain shot through his side. He dragged himself toward the emergency hatch. The air was gone, his vision blurred, but he could see it. The screen on the console flashed a single word in broken translation: core failure. He reached the hatch. He pulled the manual release. It gave way. He tumbled into the dark corridor just as the chamber exploded behind him. A wall of white energy rolled past. It threw him forward. He hit the bulkhead. His armor cracked. He gasped for air. He did not stop moving. Alarms echoed through the Nexus. The structure was dying. The human fleet felt the shockwave through space. Ships were pushed back by the ripple. The Krell formation broke completely. Their command link died. Their heavy weapons went dark. The gravity shear beams vanished. Vance lay on the metal floor. His chest hurt. His ears rang, but he was alive. He looked up. Through a cracked viewport he saw the Nexus split in two. It drifted apart, burning and broken. The war had turned. The hammer was shattered. He closed his eyes. He felt the weight of the dead. He felt the weight of the living. They had pushed past the limit. They had risked everything, and it had worked. The tremor would be felt across the stars. The Krell would remember this day, and so would humanity. The ledger was close to balanced. He just needed to make it out alive to see the end. He dragged himself forward, one step, then another. The fight was not over, but the hardest part was done. Guns fell silent. The sky over the Zalari core world was clear for the first time in months. Vance stood on the observation deck of the medical station. His side was wrapped in thick white bandages. His ribs ached with every breath. But he did not mind the pain. He looked out the wide glass window. Below him the planet was green again. Smoke had cleared. Fires were put out. Zalari repair ships moved through the upper atmosphere like slow birds. They carried water, seed pods, and medical supplies. The war was over. The Krell ascendancy had broken into pieces. Without their central command, their warlords turned on each other. Their empire crumbled from the inside. The heavy ships that once blocked the stars were now floating scrap or drifting in distant lanes. Vance took a slow breath. He felt the weight of the past months lift from his shoulders, but he did not relax. He knew peace was not the same as safety. It was just a new kind of work. He turned from the window and walked to the meeting room at the end of the hall. The doors opened quietly. Inside, the Zalari High Council waited. They wore clean robes. Their faces were tired but calm. They stood when Vance entered. They did not bow. They simply offered a place at the table. Commander Vance, the head of the council, said, "You saved our worlds. You broke the Krell. We have no words that fit the size of our thanks. We offer you full alliance. We offer you seats on the ruling council. We offer you trade routes, shipyards, and open borders. The galaxy needs to know you are here. Let us build something new together." Vance sat down. He placed his hands on the table. He looked at each council member. He saw hope in their eyes. He saw fear too. They wanted to bind humanity to them. They wanted to make sure the humans would never leave again. Vance understood the offer. It was generous. It was also a chain. "We are grateful," Vance said. His voice was soft but clear. "But we will not take seats on your council. We will not claim open borders or ruling power. We are not here to rule. We are not here to replace one empire with another. We are here to remember. 300 years ago you gave us shelter. You asked for nothing. Today we give you safety. We ask for nothing. That is how we work. We keep promises. We do not collect debts forever." The council members looked at each other. One of them smiled. It was a slow, quiet smile. "You are a strange people," the council head said. "Other species would take the power. They would write their names in the history books. You fight a war and walk away." "We will not walk away from our friends," Vance said, "but we will not become governors. Keep your council, keep your borders, keep your peace. If you need help, call us. We will answer. That is enough." The meeting ended without signatures or treaties. There were only handshakes, firm, honest. Vance left the room and walked to the communications bay. He had one more duty to finish. He sat at the main console. He opened the wideband channel. It reached every hidden outpost, every deep space dock, every quiet human colony scattered across the dark. He pressed the record button. He did not use a script. He spoke from memory. "This is Commander Vance," he said. "The war is over. The Krell threat is broken. The Zalari worlds are safe. The favor is paid. I want every human outpost to hear this. We did not come back for glory. We did not come back to conquer. We came back because we said we would. The ledger is balanced. You are free to return to your work. Keep building, keep training, keep the lights on in the dark. But know this. The door stays open. If any friend calls, we will answer. If any promise is made, we will keep it. That is who we are." Vance out. He ended the transmission. The console lights dimmed. He sat back in the chair. He closed his eyes. He thought about the long years in the caves. He thought about the cold metal halls. He thought about the faces of the people who had died in the dark so others could see the light. He thought about the mechanic with the grease on his hands, the pilot with the broken chain patch, the medic who stayed behind. They were not legends. They were just people who kept their word. That was the human way. They did not need statues. They did not need songs. They needed to know they had done the right thing. A soft knock came at the door. Vance opened his eyes. A young officer stepped inside. Her name was Lyra. She had flown on one of the boarding shuttles. She carried a data chip in her hand. Her uniform was clean. Her posture was straight. "Commander," she said, "the fleet is ready for the next phase. Supply runs are organized. Diplomatic couriers are waiting. The new generation is ready to take the helm." Vance stood up. He felt a little lighter. He walked to her. He took the data chip. He handed it back to her. "You keep it," he said. "The helm is yours now. I am stepping down." Lyra looked surprised. "But sir, you led us through the jump. You broke the nexus. You saved the line." Vance shook his head. "I kept my promise. That is all. The war is done. My time in command is over. It is your turn to build the peace. Teach them how to fight, but teach them why we fight. Remind them that strength is not about taking. It is about giving back. It is about remembering." Lyra nodded slowly. She understood. "We will remember," she said. Vance walked out of the room. He took the long corridor to the observation deck one last time. He stood by the glass. He watched the human fleet move into formation. They did not look like conquerors. They looked like workers, like builders, like guardians. Some ships turned toward trade lanes. Some moved to patrol quiet sectors. Some stayed near Zalari space just in case. They did not fly under flags of conquest. They flew under the quiet weight of duty. The galaxy would talk about the battle for a long time. They would argue about the railguns, the drone swarms, the phase cannons. They would try to copy the tactics. They would try to guess the secrets, but they would miss the point. The humans did not win because they had better metal. They won because they had better memory. They won because they treated a 300-year-old promise like a living thing. They won because they understood that gratitude is not a weakness. It is a compass. It points you home. It points you to the right thing to do. Vance turned away from the window. He walked toward the exit. His steps were slow but steady. He was tired. He was ready to rest. He knew the work would continue without him. It always does. The young would take the watches. The old would tell the stories. The ledger would stay open for new favors, new debts, new promises, and that was fine. Humans were good at waiting. Humans were good at remembering. And when the time came, they would always come back. Not for glory, not for power. But because they said they would, that was enough. That was everything. The quiet years had taught them patience. The war had tested their strength. Now the peace would prove their character. And Vance knew without a single doubt that they would pass that test too. He walked out of the room. The lights dimmed behind him. The stars burned on. The promise was kept. And the story continued.